Karma works strictly in a mirror-like way. For example, you hit Masha, June 11th. So in the next life, on June 11th, Masha will hit you. So for example, you're a maniac who killed 10 women. This means that next time you will be born as each of these women and live through this story. When you yourself, as it were, killed yourself, what happens to you is exactly what you did to other people. That is, if your ex-husband is squeezing your property, it means that in a past life, you were this ex-husband and were squeezing your own future, your property. So when you start to understand this principle, the system grants you amnesty for these stories because karma can be worked through in 3 ways by action. It's about reliving the situation. It's a feeling when someone close to you experiences something similar and you take note, or it's a thought when you're watching, let's say, a movie about such a situation and you're already taking note of it. The system is very economical. It will not force you to get into negative situations if you understand in a good way. Only if you don't understand things the right way will it literally rub your nose in your own actions.
By the way, working through karma is quite interesting. In terms of how karma can be worked through actions, feelings, and thoughts, as she mentioned in that short clip. What's the essence? The essence is that it's really true when you're working through certain things from the past. You can, for example, work through it by actually doing something, that is, by taking action. Or you might not have to take action. You can sort of relive it because, for example, in psychotherapy, there is a whole direction of reliving self-experience. That is, you go back to the past and beyond as if reliving it and rewriting it a little differently. And for the subconscious, as it turns out, based on pure experience, there's a big difference in how you go through that experience on that level. Yes, on the level of action, and since the karmic story is more about the subtle world, you can still, yes, the law of cause and effect is purely etheric, astral, mental layers. And even closer to the astral mental layer, you can very well experience what you want to experience on an astral mental, or rather sensory thought level. So in that regard, I completely agree with her. But that's, of course, about the second part. Regarding the first part, of course, it's not so straightforward. Again, as she mentioned, you hit Masha on June 11th, for example, and then you will definitely get hit in the next life or even in this life. June 11th. Well, first of all, June 11th is just certain. So coordinates, specific energetic coordinates on a particular branch of reality. So for karma, there isn't, especially for the higher realms, there isn't June 11th there. For them, it's just a flow of time. Moreover, it can sometimes speed up and sometimes slow down. Maybe you've had situations where you're living your life and you feel like time is speeding up. By the way, for those in the comments, yes, who feels like time is speeding up, there, write in the comments who exactly is in the last. For years, feels like time has really started to go by faster. Well, if you really feel that way, then good for you. It really is, because time is actually speeding up now, yes, and what was felt there before. Slower. In time, here it feels faster. I believe, and I feel, and I see this from all sides. Well, not everything is, of course, straightforward. Because in the next life, June 11th, well, that is, that branch can go completely differently. It doesn't necessarily have to happen in June. In fact, you can be born in such a way that in the place where you are born, there is no June and there is no 11th either. Because yes, who knows, maybe you'll end up on another planet altogether. Certainly, a certain energetic charge accumulates. Overall karma, here, this is a certain accumulation of energetic charge that will manifest in the next life. This charge will express itself in one form or another in a suitable situation. That's a fact. But the way it is, it really does. June 11th will express itself. Sometimes that can happen, but not always, like 1,000%. Because again, all of this very differently. Today, time moves like this, but in the next life, it might, on the contrary, slow down. If you feel that they describe spiritual processes in too linear a way, so something here isn't quite right. Because again, if we're talking about high spiritual levels, everything there is way too nonlinear. So sometimes you access such layers through your higher self that it's just wow. So to describe them, to even try to describe them linearly, you really have to make a big effort. So in this topic, again, I agree with her on the subject of karma. You can work through it both ways. This charge, by the way, through your higher self, you can see all your karmic charges very clearly and work with them. We have specific directions on this topic in the school, but I still don't agree with the first part of the description of how karma works. On the other hand, maybe she was just describing it, well, as they say, esotericism for the desperate.
Maybe, yeah, she just simplified it. So, well, it doesn't really seem that way, actually. That it's really, the emphasis is on this particular number. I just, thought about something that there is some kind of geometry of the universe, and it's like, a pattern that seems to come together. Do you feel that way? Is there such a thing?
Eventfulness.
Yeah, yeah. So events seem to be mirrored in this pattern, and it feels like everything flows out of this pattern.
In that sense, yes. There is indeed this idea of the flower of life. By the way, for those who aren't aware, Don Valo Melchizedek writes quite well on this topic. He has separate books, one of which is called The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life. I don't agree with all of his topics. He's not really disagreeing. He just draws information from certain databases, from specific branches of reality that many of us haven't been to. That's why it seems that what he describes is sometimes, as they say, slightly schizophrenic. Yes, but these are simply certain energy informational bases. Well, rare, really rare. And in general, by the way, he says that he came there into this body. Here, Melchizedek, as an experienced spirit, came into the body, displacing the spirit who lived here in his body. I would say that this sacred geometry, represented by the flower of life, is presented here on a plane in our world. So this is a certain, well, it's like, yeah, a flat surface or something. But if we take again this multidimensional world, a world where perhaps there are no forms anymore, we're talking about very high esoteric, meditative, mystical experiences. If you enter in your meditative practices into a world where there are no forms and nothing exists, the flower of life will also be manifested there, but it will just be manifested a bit differently, much more multidimensionally. It's probably even beautiful. What you're saying right now is actually a very deep topic because it's complicated there today after, more multidimensional. You observe the events in life and you really understand how beautifully they look, how geometrically, even correctly, they are arranged around some kind of clusters, like in the literal sense, a bouquet. So yeah, there are, conditionally speaking, clusters, and around them are these beautiful petals of events. There's a separate science, numerology, that tries to describe in some way this beautiful eventfulness, this flowering of occurring events. To what extent is she able to do this, and to what extent is she not able to? Again, numerology is limited by numbers. Numbers are a product of this world. This very sacred multidimensional geometry is indeed an extremely interesting topic to meditate on. And what's interesting? You can take, for example, just, I don't know, a hieroglyph or some geometric shape, and then go deeper through the higher. I focus on this form and this hieroglyph, and I receive just the deepest, some revelations that seem to have no relation to the hieroglyph, but at the same time, they relate somehow like a portal to certain knowledge. Yeah. For those interested, I guess I'm addressing the alumni club, my guys. If you're interested, you can meditate on forms, on colors, on some meanings, maybe of geometric shapes, on the meanings of numbers. And maybe even write some kind of article on this topic.
Look, I would also relate the question of karma in general to this topic. And how do you understand what karma is? It exists only in our world or in other worlds. So please give us a brief overview, and then I'll ask a few things there.
A simple example, Vasya, he chased Petya with an axe. That's the reason, and Petya is running away screaming from Vasya. That's the consequence. Or on the contrary, Petya grabbed the axe himself and chased after Vasya. That's also a consequence, a specific cause that leads to the next consequence. Vasya himself is running away from Petya screaming through the little garden. This is an example of karma in a very, very simplified form. Thank you, Danila. Sign up for the courses? Sign up. This is the simplest description of karma. So every consequence has its own cause. And as long as the world is in the illusion of space and time, as long as there is a past and a future in this world, and as long as there is movement from point A to point B, well, we're not talking about those worlds that lie outside the space-time continuum. In those worlds that lie outside of space and time, there will be causes and consequences. Just because the world itself is structured that way, that's karma.
Well, look, if, for example, I've grown to the point where I can no longer tell the difference,
You ended up,
it's bad that something is good. So I have everything the same. But I'm still in this world where there are some rules. Will karma affect me or not?
look, you will still have causes and consequences. Because in this world, there is a past and a future. And you're just saying that you've experienced certain paradigms. You've moved beyond them and found yourself in a kind of purer, deeper, wiser knowledge. And being in this knowledge, you just have a little bit, there will be other causes and consequences, on causes and consequences in any, there will be cases because you live in this world.
That's such a big question. Why is suffering created as a global phenomenon? Why are terrible torments created? Not like some weak ones, but all of this, including
Let them give an example.
unbearable.
Look, let's go. First, let's answer the question, what are torments? So when you say torments, you mean physical pain, like roughly speaking, if you pinch your leg, you feel pain in that limb. Are you talking about this or not?
Listen, well, they gave an example, for instance, that they skin people alive or they wall them up alive. So they bury such completely horrible things alive. It seems like this is some kind of experience that a person needs, perhaps. That's how you would put it.
Well, I got it. Look, again, what kind of soul chooses such an experience?
Will it choose the question?
From spiritual view? Everything. Just everything. There's a game. Let's imagine, or for example, GTA. So yeah, let's take GTA, the well-known game series from Rockstar. As far as I remember, right? What happens in GTA? The character. So you take control of a character who can do anything from there. Well, he can just do anything, right? He can go here, he can go there. Mime, another old story about, did you wander around about robbing caravans? No, there's this guy, he's online, he was coming up with the perfect game, and basically he said that he wants in this game to be able to, rob caravans and do a bunch of other inappropriate things. Well, in general, that's it. It's a separate style. I'm talking about how many people start doing exactly that. So they just start walking around this city, killing there, taking money, throwing someone out of a car, getting into a car, driving in a car, crashing that car. And at the same time, you essentially gain experience. To some extent, you gain experience. They are not made up. So these are the sufferings that so all these actions, they are perceived as suffering, well, by the characters in the game. But you yourself sitting at the computer, yeah, you perceive it just as experience. Just in the literal sense of the word, experience. So if someone comes up to you and asks, why is there such suffering here? You would tell him that it's not suffering, it's just a game. It's interesting, it's fun, in a way, even.
But the character can respond in different ways. He might say that he enjoys watching someone suffer.
Well, to some character, yeah, maybe he can. It's very important to understand. Guys, look, the answer to the question, the one you're talking about right now, yeah. It's terrible. But as soon as you step outside of that suffering, when you actually become yourself, the one who made the decision to come here, you see all of this completely differently. I'll give a more down-to-earth, more understandable example. Also, yeah, you always need to give a series of examples to make it clear. For example, we're analyzing a person's past life. In a person's past life, they were just like this Here are examples. A lot of them, I don't know, like worked as a prostitute her whole life, serving drunk, rough, sweaty men. Then in the end, one of those guys killed the person. There. You step into the spirit. So you step out again. In the moment with lives, there is no suffering at all. When this man, he suffered, he died in life. He stops to experience all these emotions. Yeah. He starts analyzing like, so what was my original goal? The original goal was, for example, to love myself. So yeah, the person came here to love themselves, but they didn't manage to accomplish that mission. And to love oneself through, as they say, I don't want to, through force. So to be aware, life intentionally throws certain challenges your way. So the person chose this for themselves. This topic is perfectly covered in Mike Newton's book. They are with the American egregore, but it ideally describes 1,500,000 stories, mostly including all sorts of, as they say, crazy stuff. And it all kind of comes down to that, exactly to that. It was a good mission. Initially, I thought it out for myself, laid it all out, the challenges, set everything up, the rapper stuff, all that. The turning point, Aku, in his life melted away, and then he came and couldn't handle it. He overdid it, as they say, in some things, just for himself. He chose challenges that were a bit more difficult than, as they say, he could handle, and that's it. But at the same time, there's this phrase that a person is never given more than they can bear. Sometimes it's right on the edge. And it even feels like it's just a bit too much, like it's about to overflow, but there's always, as they say, a way out. The question is whether a person will be able to see them or not. If he doesn't see it, he'll fall, as they say, into terrible trash, but he'll be able to see the windows. He will get through them and be able to avoid that very mess. So, as they say, if a person's skin is torn off, he is walled up alive in the walls, no matter how terrible it may sound for the mind. From the spiritual standpoint, it looks, like in a game, there, like this, yes, there, game over. And it's not even that important what the end is for that person. The important thing is that most likely he didn't handle the goals and tasks he came here for. You'll have to come back and go through it all over again. So what am I getting at? To the fact that human logic on Earth and that logic are two completely different logics, absolutely. Moreover, when we die, human logic here on Earth seems completely absurd to us. In terms of something very primitive, confined within boundaries, in one life, we don't see anything that goes beyond the boundaries of this life. It's like that for everyone. So I'm describing the experience right now. If you connect with your higher self, what exactly is that experience of the higher self? I am you. Once upon a time, there was Vasya. Vasya died and found himself in the afterlife. This is already a very primitive, very simple touch to the higher self. And when you're there, we're actually there much more often than we are here. So how long does earthly life last? Well, 50 years, well, 60, well, 70, well, 80 years. And sometimes it lasts for 100 years. We can be there for 200, 300 years, depending, as they say, on the experience of the spirit and so on. When we come here in a new body, every time we have a new body, every time our psyche is new, every time the machine is new, but at the same time, the consciousness, that higher self, is always the same. So, in reality, we are not our personality here. Much stronger. We are there because we simply spent more time there. The upper eternal personality is, of course, perfect. Differently, she looks at suffering in a completely different way. She perceives all of this as a certain experience. By the way, I've never seen a spirit actually choose suffering. The spirit can choose a difficult, harsh life, overcoming which you become better.
So it chooses possibilities?
Yes, exactly. The spirit chooses certain possibilities, but to really suffer in this harsh and difficult life, you always have a choice. You can suffer and end up sliding down this path, including to all sorts of harshness. Again, it doesn't happen, consequences, without a cause. If, roughly speaking, someone's skin was stripped off, there was a specific reason for that. He didn't just come here for no reason, right here, because they don't completely strip the skin off. Some people have their skin stripped off, while others do not. So there is a certain difference when you remember your past lives. And overall, when you start to touch the spirit, you begin to relate to suffering much more calmly and better understand your current life. And you realize that you always have a choice to suffer or not to suffer, because it's always a choice of the mind. So yes, for example, you wake up at midnight and outside the music is blasting. The windows are just rattling. You can really suffer, get angry, go out on the street, scream, shout, I don't know, rush at those guys with the knife, God forbid, and end up in prison, of course. And then to say it's terrible and they're in prison, there are bad inmates or someone else, they're in with them. You're constantly fighting, but that's your choice. But there's another choice. What can you do? For example, you can hear the music, smile. As they say, maybe sing along with them, do something for yourself, turn to the other side, get some earplugs. After all, if the music is really bothering you that much, just snuggle in and keep sleeping. In the first case, a person fell into suffering, ended up in prison, and there, I don't know, they killed him, God forbid. In the second case, the person in the same rap situation, the same trial, stayed home in a warm bed. It's nice to lie down and listen to pleasant music. It's a very primitive example, but it really explains and shows well that we always have a choice. So, suffering is a choice, unfortunately, one that a person makes based on certain premises. And they are not made up. It's just a consequence of his choices.
Dear friends, I invite you all to my course with a personal vision, Return to the True Self. This course has been around for over 12 years. And recently we launched it in English with my complete personal vision in 6 modules, working with blocks, working with egregores, working with the ego, contacting the higher self. Answers to simple questions, answers to more complex questions. And then there's what we call the Great Journey. It's contact with space, contact with the planet, contact with God, contact with anything at your request through the higher self. Health, finances, relationships, purpose, past life. The course is available at any time. You can sign up for it using the link below this video. Come on over. I'll be waiting for you.